So tomorrow's TWA, just a couple quick little clarifications, and we'll jump back into the human dignity and going over some other topics. And remember, back to your weekly syllabus has those topics on them. Rhetorical analysis, not using book, not using the sheet that you have at the back of the weekly syllabus. So it's BYOB, bring your own brain, and that'll be the content of your thing. You are not required, and you can, I mean, if you have something stuck in your mind that's from the book, but you are certainly not required to use specific examples, meaning like quoted, but you can certainly reference specific events that would be taking place as we're starting to do here with human dignity. So devices that I doubt that many people would use would probably be diction, unless there are specific terms that you want to get to. And I would be surprised, not saying you can't use them, but I would be surprised if many folks went with diction. I'd be surprised if many folks went with like syntax, because you're not going to have like the sentence structure that you would be writing about and things like that. Someone was asking, if I use imagery, is it okay if I have like animal imagery and mechanical imagery together in the same paragraph? And that would be perfectly fine. The hope would be you're probably getting around like 2 examples for each of the devices that you go with. My guess is that most of you will probably have 2 devices. Maybe you'll have enough time where you could throw in a third one that'll kind of fit. Certainly, if you can get more examples than 2, or at least how it kind of develops throughout the book, that's the more evidence, the better. But my guess is that there'll be more imagery, metaphor, allusion, motif. Even could be maybe some juxtaposition kind of ideas and stuff like that. Dynamic characters about how they're changing and whatnot. Those types of things, as opposed to the specific syntax, diction, details kind of stuff. But there's not a set number of paragraphs that you have to have. Certainly we want at least 2, and nor is there like a set number of examples that have to be within each paragraph like when it's a take home. But the more that you can have in there, certainly the better. Though, and I think I've said this before, but just to make sure, if you go with motif, what do you have to make sure you do with your motif examples based on the definition of motif? If a motif is a recurring, you have to have multiple examples. So you can't go, hey, there's a motif of fog. Chief's in a fog in this one time. Well, if it's motif, how does it keep coming back over and over and over again? Certainly you don't have to say 52 pages later or anything like that, but you would want to prove how it does keep kind of reoccurring over and over again. Not counting questions about human dignity and all those other topics, but even like general questions about TWA in general. Yes. Yeah. So feel free to spread the word. And Mr. Payne said you're going to do this prompt, and that won't happen. They know that too, but yeah, so you're not at a disadvantage this first period of class. So.
Do you have any extra sheets?
Yeah, right behind you.
Will the prompts all have to do with one of the things that they put back in the sheet? Because you asked if there was one they would want to do.
These would be, well, yes, they're not all there. Those things there that you have, the right behind Julie, and it's the weekly. It's on the back of the weekly syllabus. There's obviously, okay, so there's 6 ideas. So it's not like there's going to be one TWA for each one of those things. But whatever TWA, whatever wording I finally decide to go with, and stuff to fine tune it, I would say definitely one of those 6 ideas, or maybe in some ways a combination of those 6 ideas, would be applicable to your prompt. So to say that it'll actually go, heroic versus anti-heroic characteristics or qualities, that phrase might not be in there, but those would certainly still be concept that could show up in the TWA. So if you feel pretty good about those ideas, I'd say you'd probably be okay when it comes into the TWA. That answer it? Okay. So human dignity on Monday, we were going over, I think this was the list that we had. We were kind of ending with the gas station, the dock, and stuff like that. I'd say there's probably one more that I would want to include, just because I'm thinking ahead with rhetorical devices and whatnot. Any other times, and I'm kind of thinking early on when McMurphy maybe first realizes that things are a little different on the ward than in real life, when he would kind of realize that maybe these folks treated quite the same way as everybody else. Any guesses? So what I'm thinking, Melissa? Yeah, and that'd probably kind of all be in the same time, but that's a good one. So like the lack of laughter. And I'm kind of thinking back to, we mentioned this on Monday when we were talking about the hens within the nursery rhyme. Because she's a good fisherman. And then catching hens, put them in pens. What was the hens chicken reference that we were connecting back? The pecking party. No, you're going same place with it. Well, remember, the patients are kind of pecking at one another. Harding is the victim, so to speak, in this example, when McMurphy's going, hey, wait a minute. And after the pecking party is then when you have Harding mentioning the whole rabbit-wolf kind of idea. So with these examples coming up of either when human dignity is being lost or human dignity is being gained, doesn't mean we have to come up with something for every single one of these examples or terms. But can you think of any devices, rhetorical devices, that you could now start to explain how they would match up with those examples, or some of those examples, and be able to explain the significance of it? Okay, so the one that we just mentioned. And I could see, Julie goes animal imagery. Marissa takes a similar example. She might kind of argue that there is metaphors happening where we're rabbits, she's the wolf kind of idea. Both of them would certainly be acceptable, kind of depending upon where you go with the argument. If Marissa decides that she wants to use imagery someplace else, she could then substitute in metaphor here where you would be going with animal imagery, and kind of vice versa. So animal imagery with the pecking party, we got the chickens, we got the rabbits, we got the wolf. That would certainly be a possibility. What about laughter? Since it's something that is not there, is not there, is not there, gets mentioned, it's not there, all of a sudden it does appear. Fishing trip. Yeah, it could go with motif. Remember, motif doesn't mean that it has to be a metaphorical concept. It doesn't have to be a specific color. A motif can certainly be a recurring idea or concept. We're going to have books later on where just like a phrase is considered a motif because it keeps coming up over and over and over again. So it goes. Do your motif. What about Alice on the Wall? Could be, yeah. I'd say there's another one that could certainly go with. Some folks will want to go into religious allusions. Others, we're going to want to steer clear of it. I'm kind of thinking because it's so early on within the book when you see it. Keep in mind, he's someone who has gone through EST. He's someone who's gone through the ringer, so to speak, with everything that Nurse does.
Just like a different thought, like with the TV, could you say like irony because they're watching it even though it's a blank screen?
You said irony?
Yeah.
Sure. And even after, Chief kind of even makes a comment, because this is at the end of part number 1, when that event occurs, you got a whole bunch of patients who are sitting around a TV saying absolutely, what do they say when they're watching TV the first time? Nothing. But what's happening to them? I hear what you said. Yeah, they are. They're kind of being a little bit assertive. They're sitting there all around the TV, like this, not even going, he strikes out, or here's the pitch or anything, but they're just literally watching the TV, and what's Nurse doing? I wouldn't say she's telling him to stop. She is yelling at them nonstop, and Chief makes the comment that anyone who walked into the room would have thought that the patients and this 50-year-old woman were all insane or nuts. What are they doing? Nothing. How disruptive are they being from a physical sense or a verbal sense? Not at all. But at the same time, they're still getting yelled at about it. So the fact that, one, they're watching a TV and there's absolutely nothing on, yes, that's ironic in its own sense. And then the fact that they're getting yelled at about it, that they're being complained about, certainly would be one. One of the other ideas that got mentioned yesterday was the whole idea of what it means to be sane versus insane. You have a little bit of an irony here happening with the TV. There's an ironic switch that would take place. That could be an example that someone might end up using over here if you ended up having to look at the concepts of being sane and insane. The hope would be, and Noel, we'll get to you here in a second, that for a lot of these things, depending upon the argument that you're looking at, you probably, bless you, would be able to switch them around. Ellis on the wall, I'm guessing that most of us, if not everyone, would look at that's probably not the appropriate way to treat a patient. So when you have the topic about the treatment or mistreatment of patients, that could be an idea that would come over there, along with the pecking party and whatnot. So I don't want to make it sound like whatever example is in your head you would be able to use for all prompts necessarily, but there certainly would be some carryover with a lot of them where this example could be used for 3 or 4 of them. This example could be used for another 3 or 4 of them.
I was going to ask, do you like sort of define human dignity? Like I know like since we have to connect these back to it, like if we did have had it like on our phone or in the phone, like how would we connect?
If well here, I want to finish this thing and then we'll come right back to you. Ellis hanging on the wall. He can't move much. There's not a whole lot going on mentally for him anymore. What happens by the end of the book? Not to Ellis, but to somebody else.
He's like technically alive, but he's like after his life.
Before Chief does his final act, yeah.
Like completely powerless and just like nothing.
Okay. And so if you do, this is kind of also pulling from that religious illusion, I guess, a little bit. We kind of said McMurphy as being a martyr. He's already on there cross-posed with being Alice. So you kind of see what is going to happen to McMurphy early on. We call that, Tyler. There you go. I didn't put that one on the quiz, did I? I'm sorry. Okay, so you were going, if say you do have a problem that deals with human dignity, do you need to define it? Was the question?
Yeah, like, well, no, like, I think that I feel like any of them sort of, kind of, not define, but like, kind of like, in the intro, like, if...
It's never a bad idea to establish your own position or interpretation of a key term. So, like, human dignity, the idea of being sane versus insane. What does sanity mean to you? What does insanity mean to you? There's no reason why you could not do that. And yeah, I think I probably would recommend it. I would certainly probably only do that within the introduction, establish what I mean by the term, and therefore then I can explain, let's say, explain rhetorical or analyze rhetorical devices Kesey uses to expose the lack of human dignity on the word. Okay, so you would identify rhetorical devices that are best illustrating when they lack that dignity. So mentioning, the animal imagery with the pecking party, that they are rabbits, pretty kind of like meek, timid characters compared to a wolf, which is going to be much more aggressive. Therefore, Nurse Ratched is able to manipulate the patients into doing whatever she wants, and this is a way that she strips them of their human dignity. That would be the type of analysis thing that you would be doing. But you establishing what you mean by human dignity within an intro, it'd be very similar to like synthesis essays where you were defining disobedience or social progress, that kind of stuff, because there could be a little variation between what you think human dignity is and what Emmy thinks. Doesn't mean one's right, one's wrong, but you certainly can have different perspectives, interpretations of those things. So to do that, there wouldn't be any kind of problem with it. It's also kind of like a nice little way to do an attention grabber.
and not that, again, I don't want you to pull a song lyric or come up with a Ben Franklin quote, but you're establishing the relevance by, this is what we mean by human dignity, this is how they don't have it. Or this is how they regain it, depending upon how the way the prompt would be worded. Answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on here where you see devices starting to pop up? Any on here where you kind of like the,
Cheswick's stand for cigarettes.
Mhm.
Like kind of in the book, like kind of Chief kind of talks about like size, not like size imagery. I don't know, but like, do you know what I mean? Like, but Cheswick's standing could symbolize him being bigger, like getting like he's not actually changing in size, but like he's standing up and like when he's tall, everyone else like he's like bigger than them in the way that like Chief means when he says that he's small, like not size.
Sure, and it would kind of depend upon what you're doing. So let's say that you talk about laughter, okay? And to be able to laugh is to have some confidence in yourself. You have some dignity. If you do not laugh at all, there's not any emotion, you kind of lack that dignity. So let's say you do talk about that, and I'm saying this because then you use motif. Because I bet a lot of folks at some point could use the idea of size motif. What you don't want to do in one body paragraph is combine two different types of motifs, because either the argument won't be consistent because you're jumping from one type to another without going into detail about either, or you will have a mega paragraph that will leave you with hardly any time to do anything else. What you cannot do is Hannah can't go, Kesey uses the motif of laughter and the motif of size to get his point across, because now she's double dipping with that one device twice. If you already have used motif of laughter, I think, yeah, you certainly still could use Cheswick's stand for cigarettes. Your point about size motif would be an idea that would work. I think it probably is best suited when you're talking about Chief, because he's the one who really, big nurse, I'm small. My dad used to be tall, and then he got smaller. My mom was always big, McMurphy being big, and all that kind of stuff. What is so significant before it leading to his death? Why is the fact that Cheswick's making a stand kind of surprising? And I'm not trying to put this into like an irony kind of way.
He does it without his support.
Okay, and so you would expect that he would want to have McMurphy's support to do it, and therefore by him acting this way without support, it is so out of character for pretty much anyone, on the ward. Now, even though McMurphy does not stand with him, so to speak, does McMurphy play a big part in his stand? I'd still say so, because of the fact that he's seen McMurphy do it before. It gives him the inspiration to stand up on his own. So you have a contrast of the way that Cheswick used to act to the way that he does act now. Not talking about a singular phrase or a couple terms or anything, but I think there'd be a pretty good J term that you could use for a lot of the characters. Juxtaposition. Remember, kind of like a definition of juxtaposition?
It's like contrast that creates
And a lot of times with juxtaposition within a literary sense, you can kind of go back and find a person or a scene, an event, a time, something that kind of causes this contrast to take place. So if you were looking for, say, the growth of someone's human dignity, or there's even the one part that mentions about a change in character size, juxtaposition could be one of those things where you could go, and juxtaposition is good for emphasizing things. It's a good way of emphasizing some kind of change or growth that has taken place. So the behavior of, in this case, Cheswick, compared to how he used to act pre-McMurphy with how he's acting now with post-McMurphy, Kesey juxtaposes these actions to emphasize his desire now for human dignity. Juxtaposition requires a little bit of explanation because it's not something where you can go, and this quote here is an example of juxtaposition. You have to kind of explain how that contrast happens, but it is certainly a good device that can get used in a lot of text. I think moving forward, that's going to be a device that a lot of you start to utilize, not maybe necessarily for this TWA, but with like independent reading and other essays moving forward. Would you be able to fit all of this into one essay? No, but you have the ideas of motif, imagery, irony, juxtaposition, foreshadowing, or religious allusions. You're giving yourself options, and that's the main hope, that you're not relying upon like just one or two devices.
If you used like motif and you had a paragraph on the laughter motif, and then you had a different paragraph on the size motif where you talked about like Cheswick's stand, and then
You better have a third body paragraph.
yeah, I was gonna ask like if you like ran out of time, like you said like previously, like with like 2 body paragraphs or something, okay, like whoever like if you did 2 motif paragraphs, you'd have to have another one.
You would have to have a second separate unique device. So like I mentioned that, we don't want Hannah using laughter and size together, nor can she just only rely on those. If you're dead set on using a laughter motif and a size motif, I would do my other paragraph first. That imagery, the metaphor, whatever. Because if I run out of time after I did laughter and size, but all I've written about is motif, not saying what you wrote is poor, but you don't have like that breadth, that scope of that range of evidence and devices coming in. You've really limited yourself to one kind of device. So if you did go, and I'm just picking randomly, foreshadowing, and then a double motif paragraph or paragraphs where one's laughter, one's size, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But if it is laughter, then size, and then go, hence, Kesey uses motif to reinforce blah, 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 you've really, limited your argument at that point. Anything else with human dignity? On Monday, we were mentioning about questions about sane versus insane, and then also change in characters. We can take a look at one of those, or there could be another one on here that you got concerns about. You tell me.
Yeah.
Sane, insane?
Because we kind of just talked about change.
What kind of go back the way we did before? What would be some scenes where you feel like the question about what it means to be sane versus insane shows? What would be moments where you think the characters maybe kind of dip back and forth? Surprises with it? When do those issues come up?
Like in the beginning when Party would say about Toronto Rapids, but McMurphy's kind of telling them, you guys are just normal guys.
Okay. So the whole idea about, and not necessarily going that the characters therefore call themselves insane, but a challenge in perspectives about, okay. So going back to that pecking party. And then probably a similar thing is when he realizes, McMurphy, that they are not committed in the same way that he is, that they have the ability to leave, but they decide to stay. Committed versus a voluntary admission. Okay, good.
Whenever the nurse is like in a meeting with like all the doctors, and then they're like, "Oh, I don't think he's insane. I think he's just dangerous." And then she's like, "Oh, let's keep him here like for more evaluation." Like they're talking about what to do with him.
Okay. So like the nurse's perceptions of McMurphy, decisions on like how to handle him.
The whole scene with the TV where like they're all sitting there doing essentially nothing.
So the one that we had on the
Yeah,
previous.
and
Okay.
she's like freaking out on them because they're doing nothing. Like in that particular instance, like who is
Stop doing
nothing?
that.
Yeah, like who's the insane one?
Okay.
With the going like back and forth between sane and insane with Billy, like he starts off with like us and not being confident. Then he has the part with the candy and like he kind of changed. Okay. Then like he changes and he's like confident in that one part, like where they're like waking up and
Mhm.
his is there. He's not ashamed or like stuttering. And then after that, when she says he's gonna tell someone, he goes back and like reverts to that like stuttering the issue, like don't tell me.
So that I don't forget, because I'm going to kind of contradict myself maybe here a little bit. what could be a device that you could use if you want to go into detail about Billy's stuttering? And again, not saying you have to have like exact quotes the whole way throughout, because that's not the case.
Like diction or something.
It's like that, I'd say syntax, because again, diction, you're looking at individual word choice, but syntax, the sentence structure where it kind of emphasizes. The syntax when he speaks, if he does have confidence, it tends to be more fluid, and then when he's really getting kind of nervous and upset is when the stuttering starts to come in. That could be a syntax reference that you could make. So I guess before I was going, I don't think you would use syntax. This would be a time when it would be possible. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to quote the syntax, line by line or anything like that. But if you could explain the change in syntax, then you're better illustrating how there could be some movement in the way that he perceives himself, whether being sane or insane, stuff like that. Julie, was your hand?
Like how Chief goes like in between like mental states in different chapters.
Like just his overall mental state. Yep. So Chief's mental state slash, I don't want to use a certain term, perspective, I guess would be one. Very similar to perspective, and this isn't probably a typical rhetorical device that we would necessarily use, but if you're talking about the way that Chiefs narrates the book, his overall point of view, again, that would kind of be a device that you could certainly use. Someone could use the term point of view. I think not trying to make you use a certain term, you could go back to the juxtaposition where you get a contrast, emphasizes his mental state when you have a very lucid chapter versus one where air raid is in all caps and he's going back to nursery rhymes and flashbacks and certainly all that kind of stuff that would be happening. TV scene, certainly we already kind of mentioned about the idea that there is irony with it. I'd say Lana was kind of hinting at that she's yelling at them for doing absolutely nothing that would be happening. It was the first one, pecking party. That animal imagery was certainly one. What do you think about this one? Nurse's perceptions of McMurphy. Any kind of devices that you could kind of see happening with that one?
Like I can't really like pinpoint a rhetorical device, but it's almost like she's like letting her like own like personal like not fight but like her personal like issue with McMurphy like kind of like cloud her like medical like evaluation of him.
What is she most concerned about? Whether it be McMurphy or like the ward in general.
I think she's most concerned about the ward because it's her ward.
You said the ward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, it's her like area of like expertise, and she doesn't want to mess it up.
So she wants to maintain. Yeah, you could prefer. I was thinking power. And the reason being because it keeps coming up over and over and over, and the fact that you could even argue that the two of them were dueling for power, and this would certainly kind of depend upon the way the prompt would be worded, but that in itself can be a motif because it's a concept that keeps kind of reoccurring over and over again, a battle that keeps recurring over and over again.
I was just gonna say, like, when you asked whether she's concerned about, like, McMurphy or the board, like, she's concerned about the power that he's, like, he's not, like, he's sort of controlling the power and control he has over them, and the influence, like, the way he's, like, inspiring them, like we talked about with Cheswick, is, like, undermining or, like, lessening the power and control that she previously had over them, so.
Yeah, no, I would think so. And whether you're talking about McMurphy, whether you're talking about Nurse, like in these ways, or I could even kind of think some other prompts, and where Emma's going, I can't quite pinpoint it. What is something that, since Kesey doesn't come out and tell you this character's good, this character's bad, this character's virtuous, this one is corrupt or whatnot, what's he using then, since you're coming up with these conclusions? He's giving you details. He's giving you some things, Alyssa. He's giving you indirect characterization. So if you were looking at the way that a character acts, and you were kind of coming up with like details about the way the character acts to try to reinforce a certain point, indirect characterization could certainly be a type of technique that you would be able to use where you get into the details. So, you know, again, for sane, insane, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of carryover with the other ones, but syntax, that irony, the motif, the imagery, the characterization, you know, point of view that we have down for that one, a lot of those would carry over to those other prompts. The bare minimum that we would be looking for is to come up with 2 of those things. And again, if an opportunity presents itself and you're able to get 3, that's all the better, all the stronger. So the key is going to be when you get the prompt tomorrow, take a breath, digest it, look at it, think about it. If you know what it is you want to write, you can write it in about 30 minutes. So if there's nothing wrong with giving yourself 5 to 10 minutes to kind of plan stuff out, then attack it, as opposed to just start scribbling right away, because then it might